Amber J. Adams is the founder and creator of the Fab Life Project, a platform dedicated to helping women consciously create the life they want to live. In 2018, she quit her job to take a year-long career break and a travel sabbatical. Welcome to the 12 Days of Career Breaks. I'm Roshida Dowe of roshidasontheloose.com.
And I'm Stephanie Perry of Vicarious.com. We're interviewing 12 Black women who took time off of work to travel. We're talking about pushing through fear and living your best life now. Make sure that you hit subscribe to Rashida's channel so that you'll be notified when we post our next video.
All right, Amber, let's get straight to the questions. So there's one thing that I totally wanted to get into, and that was you started the Fab Life Project like a decade ago, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, but then you took the sabbatical last year. And it feels like those two were so closely combined. Can you talk about how the project started and then how you got to where you are now?
That's such a great question. So I started the Fab Life Project way back. It will be a decade in July 2010. I remember the date exactly. I was working in my cubicle at the time. I was the editor and writer for Essence magazine. And I was in my cubicle. It was in the midst of the recession was just ending. And on everyone's mind was this idea that work is not guaranteed. Is this what I really want to be doing? There are just all these different questions that were coming up for people during this time period. And so while I was there in my cubicle, at the time I was 25, which is like, oh my God, so long ago. But I was thinking I didn't want my generation, which is, I guess I'm a millennial, to become these jaded people that I saw around me, like people who were working, but they weren't really happy and not feeling fulfilled. And I saw how I felt like the internet was giving us so many different opportunities to do something new and different. And I wanted to really capture that energy. So I started the Fab Life Project. I started writing about things like, one of my favorite posts was, "You are replaceable. Now go do cool things," because with this idea that you need to keep that in mind. Nothing is for granted. And if there's something that you really want to be doing with your life, you should go do it. Now, the flip side of that was that as I was writing and things were going well, my life started feeling not quite so fab. Like over time, I switched jobs, and then there was different things with that energy that didn't feel good to me. But also there were a lot of dreams that I had that I felt like I had never really addressed. And one of those dreams was that I always wanted to travel for an extended period of time. I was too afraid to do it when I was in my early 20s, when I had just gotten out of college. I had pushed through, I had gotten a job, but I still had this dream of wanting to do this. And I started to slowly get to this point where I didn't feel fabulous. I didn't feel like writing about wanting to have this life that you were really leading on your own terms when I wasn't doing that. And so for me, things just kind of came to a point where one of the last posts I wrote about was how, I'm refreshing my life. But what happened was I had this job, and literally I was about to sign a lease for an apartment in New York City. It would have ended up costing me like $1,500 a month plus. And I knew in my mind, had that little voice that was like, you don't really want to do this. You want to do something else. But I was going to go along with it because I just really wasn't happy with what I was doing. And literally not even 24 hours before I was to sign that lease, I got laid off from that job. And it really just kind of put everything, like suddenly the light was on all these things that I had said that I wanted to do. And travel was a huge thing for me. And I made the decision then that I want to focus on what I wanted to do. So I ended up getting another job with the idea of I want to save as much money as I possibly can, because now is going to be that time. I want to take this career break. And that's basically how I got to where I am. So I started feeling, I guess you could say, more fabulous, more like myself as I went on with that process and just made the decision to do it.
That's amazing that you listened to the sign,
Yeah.
the sign came and was like, you don't want to do this. And you were like, you know what? You're right. A lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, but this is the path, that everybody takes and that I'm supposed to take. I guess being the having a business called the Fab Life kind of gives you a little extra permission to try new things,
To try new things.
if you have a blog
Exactly.
post that says, you know, do cool stuff, you have to do cool stuff.
I have to do cool stuff. It's a lot of pressure, but I just feel like it really was. I'm probably the only person I could say that found out that they got laid off and laughed hysterically because I felt like the universe was just like, girl, bye. What were you trying to do?
Yeah. It's funny. Your stories and mine mirror each other in a lot of ways. I
Mm,
was laid off. I knew I was going to be laid off. I knew my lease was up, but I was like, I can get another job. Let me get another job. And then
mm.
they sent me the rent increase notice, and I was like, no,
Now,
no. This is
now,
like an 8% raise, and I was already paying $2,000 in the
yeah,
Bay Area. I was like, nope, nope. So
nope.
that's when I was like, if I don't want to live here, if I want to move because I don't want to pay this rent, I might as
Hmm.
well like move, like do it
Right.
big.
Do
And so
it big.
it's like you face those decisions, and it's like, which way do you go? Do you sink in deeper into where you are? Maybe that's right for a lot of people, or do you kind of
Exactly.
say like, let's see what else is out there? And we both
Right.
know that same, see what the other option is.
Exactly. That was exactly how I felt. I felt like, and maybe a lot of women who see this will kind of identify with this feeling. Like,
Mhm.
I'll be 35 in 2020. I felt like, there's like this idea of kind of small windows of time where as a woman, your life can change in a lot of different ways and you don't know. And you can't necessarily plan for all of those things. But what I felt like I could plan for were the things that I knew I really wanted to do and the things that a change in my life status could make more complicated or could delay. So I felt like while I still had this time, it was for me. I don't have a husband, I don't have a long-term boyfriend, partner, no kids, whatever, that this was my time to really do this. And so I went for it.
That's
How
great.
did this become the thing? How did travel become the thing? Have you always been into travel or?
That's I have always, I think for me, I'm just a really big reader. So I grew up, I'm here now in my hometown in Memphis, Tennessee. And luckily for me, my mom really pushed reading a lot and I took to it so much. So even though I live in a city that's literally landlocked, like maybe the Mississippi River is there, but in your mind, everything that's around you, especially when you're a kid, is just around you. But because I read so much, at a young age, I started having this outside knowledge that there's something more out there. There's something more out there. And then, unfortunately for me, like my mom passed away when I was 14 years old. And so reading really kept me on track. But also, I knew that my mom never got to travel the way that she had wanted to. Like, she never even got on an airplane. And so I look at to see that she's had a daughter who's literally at this point has been to I think 20 plus countries, who's quit her job to travel and do all of these things would be so amazing to her. And so I always kind of had that energy of I don't take life for granted in any capacity, very aware that, one day things can be this way, the next day they could be something totally different, and that I just have to really live it to the fullest. And so being able to go and connect with other people in other countries and see things and eat things and taste things has just always been something I just really, really wanted to do.
Great.
So it's one thing to say, all right, my job and my apartment are conspiring to to make me leave. But it's another thing to actually put in the effort to go. What was the planning process like? You told us that you got another job that you thought would help you save up.
Right.
How
So
long did that take? What was that like?
it didn't take me long to find another job. I think I got laid off in August, and by like end of October, early November, I had found a new job. And so what I did was my goal was to really approach this strategically. So I got a new job not only because I wanted to save more money, but I wanted to solidify where I was in my career so that when I came back from traveling, I wouldn't have to take a job that was, below what I was doing. I would be looking at things that were either a lateral move or something that was above it, or things that would just give me more experience. So that was a strategic part of it, being able to save as much money as I could. So when you get a new job, you're able to negotiate for more money. I did that. Was able to say, okay, I'm only living off one paycheck. I paid off like some debt that I had, did that, and then I just started saving aggressively for the trip. So for me, it was very strategic, thinking about what are all the different buffers that I feel like I should have, and how might this look in a year's time from now, and what would I like to do to give myself the best chance possible, so that when I'm done with this, or if I decide I'm going to extend it more or do something else, I have as many options as I possibly can.
Great. So you talked about not having that lease to sign.
Yeah.
Talked about not having like that job to hold you back because you had a job, you had a intentionally chosen a job that you knew you were going to leave. Were there other obstacles that you had to plan around, things that were kind of blocking your way to leaving that you had to maneuver around?
I would say that one of the things that I had to plan around or really take on and tackle was that I had been living in New York for 9 years at this point, and that had become a big part of my identity. And New York is extremely work centered, work centered, work centered. No one around me was planning on doing something like this. They would cheer me on, they would be kind of like, wow, I'm surprised. But it wasn't the life that other people around me were leading. And so for me, it felt like, okay, if I leave New York now, like this is something I've worked so hard to be here, to climb up this ladder here. I really had to dig in my heels. That if I leave, I no longer have that identity anymore. And I also don't have kind of like the work that I put in to get to that place, and where I might be able to find another job with a similar title, being able to pop back into the city if I wanted to could definitely be an obstacle as well. So that one was definitely one. I would say that, you know, my family, it's like, I wouldn't say supportive per se, but my dad's pretty hands off. So that was good, and where I didn't feel like that familial pressure on different things. But I think for me, it was just like kind of a lot of internal stuff, mindset stuff that I really had to deal with, and that I probably myself was like my biggest obstacle, where I remember I would look up resources and I would see, oh my God, this is so possible. I could 100% do this. And then I would be like, oh my God, okay, I can do this. Okay, it can really happen. And that would really freak me out because, you know, for a lot of people traveling, it's just like this pipe dream that's there. And when you have a dream that's there, you can complain about life, whatever, you have this dream. But when you actually reach your hand out, you actually touch it, you're actually going for it, suddenly that becomes a different game that you're trying to play, and you have to learn how to move yourself out of the way.
Now, so a lot of us have an identity that kind of solely revolves around work, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about the pressure, like leaving New York, and what's that going to mean about your identity, and you know, how did you cope with that? Did you have someone to work through that, talk through that, or?
I think for me, I coped with it by really trying to look and find as many people who looked like me as possible who were doing this. So that's when I started discovering other travel bloggers or other people who had taken time off, and like finding the different resources that could make it happen. I definitely talked to my friends, but my friends were, you know, they were kind of living a different life. They were really focused on work, or my friends in Memphis were focused on family, so it wasn't the same. So for me, it really was leaning on a lot of kind of online support, and really seeing who else had done this, who can I reach out to. If they can do it, I can do it. And just finding different groups where people were telling their story. And I was like, oh, okay. Like you started to kind of build up that muscle and see that it was really possible.
It is a muscle. It's
Yeah.
something that you have to exercise. It doesn't come
Mm-hmm.
naturally. If you're going to make any big change, especially something that when you don't have an example right in front of you, you
Right.
have to just take some steps and keep taking steps and keep exercising that muscle. And then it does grow. The fear does shrink, and
Yeah.
your courage and your commitment to it does grow, but it's not a natural thing. Sometimes people think that
No.
if it's not coming to me naturally, it's not meant to be, but maybe it's just, you know, you got to work at it.
Exactly. Like, I feel like even though people in my life would probably tell you, oh, Amber's a go-getter, she's ambitious, we're not shocked that she did this. What they don't know is the flip side of that is that, you know, I'm still very much human. I'm like, okay, afraid of this, afraid of like what will happen if I do X, Y, and Z, what might not happen if I do this. There were a lot of variables that were, going on, and I really had to, like you said, step by step, push myself, do one thing, okay, do the next thing, and just try to keep it moving. So
Yeah.
I moved on out of Tennessee.
It's okay. It's
Questions.
okay.
Are you still on your sabbatical now?
So my sabbatical, I originally planned for it to be 1 year. That was what I said. I'm going to do 1 year. I quit my job. It was October 19th, 2018. I remember the day. It was a Friday. I was like, bye bye. I traveled. I did a mix of traveling in different countries and then also spent some time at home because my family hadn't seen me for 10 years, like for like more than a couple of weeks here and there at a time. So now I came back to the States early October because my brother got married and I was in the wedding. And so I kind of started easing into, I guess, USA life again, or at least trying to think about, well, what was going to be next. Either I was going to get a job or I was going to run away to Mexico. These were like the options, right? And so I ended up, one of my old bosses reached out to me. So I'm working, but I work remotely. So yes, I know, I'm very excited. So I work remotely. So I could be anywhere at this moment in time, which is pretty cool. And I think it was been really good to kind of ease back in that way because I can make my own schedule. I can be anywhere I want to be. And I still have my freedom, which feels really, really good.
So when you left, you talked about setting yourself up so that you could get a job you wanted when you came back. Can you talk about other parts of your reentry plan? I'm sure you weren't expecting that boss to call you, so that's a huge blessing to get the job that you got, a job you like, but you can work whenever you want.
Yeah.
But can we talk about what your plan was if that call hadn't happened?
Right. That's a great question. So what I did when I first started traveling, when I first left the country, it was in February. I went to Colombia. And during that time, I had gotten a career coach. And so I was working with a coach because we had this plan of parallel planning where we wanted to think about me maybe starting something, doing some consulting when I got back, but also making sure that I was networking and talking to different people in my field so that I could have some conversations rolling as I was traveling. And so that was one of the things that felt really good for me. Even if I didn't have a coach, it helped to have her to really kind of think about directions. But because I liked it when she said, oh, we want to do some parallel planning. I was like, oh, I love that term. That sounds really good. But it was super helpful in that as I was traveling, I made sure, people knew that I was traveling, that I talked about it, that I thought about my travel in terms of almost being kind of like a fellowship that I was creating for myself and thinking about really framing it in this way where sometimes you feel like people take a break and they feel kind of guilty about or whatever. I never wanted to feel that way. I wanted to feel like, hey, yes, I worked for like 12 years. I lived in this busy city for 10 years. I definitely deserve to take a break. And not only am I taking a break, I'm learning so much. I'm doing all of these different things and it's amazing. And you should know about it. And you should be happy to have me on your team because I've expanded my global view. So my whole thing was definitely, exactly, it was making it a part of my personal and professional brand from the jump and never feeling as if this was something that I needed to hide. It's on my resume. I have it that I took a career break on my resume. And these are some of the things I did during my break. And one thing was funny, I had an ex-boyfriend when I first started kind of like talking about the travel really heavily. He was like, well, if you take a year off, how are you going to work again? People are going to think you took this year off and now you're not ready to work and blah, blah, blah. Like just such negativity. And I said, you know what? I would not want to be on anyone's team who looks at me and tries to deny me a year of my life. That's not the type of person that I would want to work for anyway. So I've always been very upfront about that because I feel like it gives me the space to gauge and see who are the types of people I want to work with. If you don't respond with, oh my God, that's amazing, I probably don't need to talk to you.
It's a good point.
And that's exactly the response that you get. I was a hospital pharmacy technician. I came back and I applied back at my old hospital and at another hospital. And everyone I interviewed with was like, oh, that's wonderful. My son did it. My nephew did it. My so-and-so did it. I wish I had done it. And they were they basically told me how that gap year was going to benefit me professionally.
Exactly.
Oh, now you have better problem solving skills and you have better people skills. And So that fear that it's going to be so hard to find a job when you come back, listen to what Amber and I are telling you. People love that about us.
Right. Just own it. Like even my chiropractor was like, go, just go. You know, my whole thing is you just really got to own your story and go for it, which is like my whole thing with the Fab Life Project is really about owning your story and tapping into the things that you really wanted to do and just finding a way to go for it.
While you were out there, Amber, did you ever think about not coming back?
100%. A lot of the time.
Why are you?
Of the time. I just told one of my friends that I find the USA boring. And she was just kind of like, what? Like the entire country. I was like, I mean, what can I say? Yes, there were definitely some times when I thought about not coming back, or at least I started to feel like I was longing for a sense of home, but it was a home I hadn't created yet. It wasn't home New York. It wasn't home Tennessee. It was like something in my head that I haven't yet seen. But I felt like when I was out there, I got a clearer vision for what that could be. And that was really, really powerful for me. And there were definitely some times when I was like, you know, once you get going, you discover how easy it is to just keep going. You know, it's almost harder to come back because once you're out there and you discover, okay, I can do this and I can travel for free, or I can do this, and you start seeing how you can maneuver, it's almost like, why would I come back?
Okay. Tell us, where did you go?
So I went to
Colombia.
Yes, I went to 9 different countries this year. So Colombia was the first of the 9. Then I went to Chile, Argentina, Spain, Portugal, Poland, Czech Republic, Germany, and England.
Wow. Did you have a favorite out of those?
I would say I would pick Poland because Poland was the place where I knew I would be out of my comfort zone probably the most. I knew I was not really going to see Black people. I knew that people weren't really going to be speaking English like that. And yet I went anyway. And I was literally the only Black person on the plane going from Portugal to Poland. And when I got there, it was like you could see, if you saw another Black person, maybe I saw one every other day, we would wave. We would do the nod. There was like, you know, that what's it called, the terms of cultural acknowledgement, where, you know, it's like, hey girl, hey, or hey boy, hey, I see you. But Poland was definitely one of my favorites because I had no idea what was going to happen when I got there. What would I be getting into? And it ended up being like so amazing. The landscape is amazing. Like it was phenomenal.
The pierogies,
amazing.
Okay.
Amazing. Polish food is almost kind of like soul food. Like there was one day where we had like what appeared to be like smothered pork chops, and then there was some cabbage that kind of tasted like greens. I was like, what is this? All I need is some cornbread and I will be complete.
So Poland. This is the first time we're hearing that from anyone. So would you recommend Poland, even though you rarely saw Black people, would you recommend it for other Black female solo travelers?
100%. Like people were very nice to me, and I feel like Poland has a kind of a negative reputation, like that just kind of is there. And I don't know if it's left over from historical things or what, but everyone was really nice to me everywhere I went. And like I would see like grandmas would kind of like almost resting in bitch face, and then I would smile at them and they would just like, and they would just smile back at me and be like just so happy. But everyone was just super helpful and super nice. Like I never felt in danger there. Like I had this experience where me and one of my friends, we went on this bike ride, and we were in this tiny town in Poland, like teeny. And we went on this bike ride, and he was like, let's turn this way, and we go, and we're in this beautiful field. And that had been my vision for traveling, to be in a wide open field on a bicycle. I look to my left and see forest. I look to my right and see like water. Like it was just phenomenal. And it crossed my mind that here I am, a Black American female in this open field with no fear that I'm trespassing on someone's land, and the first thing they're going to do is shoot me. Like it clicked right then and there. And so to be able to experience that freedom and experience it the way that I did was awesome. And I definitely had that moment in Poland, a place where people probably wouldn't think that I would have that, but it was great.
It's amazing. Now, did you have a least favorite country out of all of them?
Not on this trip. No, I didn't have a least. I think I missed South America a lot because I felt like when you're in the parts of Europe, like I want to explore more Eastern Europe than Western Europe. because Western Europe is so super developed, it's so organized, everything's going to kind of run the way it runs. And I miss having some of the surprises that come when you're in a developing country, and you ask for like I remember ordering like a hot dog in Colombia, and it came with like juice, and they gave me like this weird little personal picture of juice, and I was like, what is this? But I was like, this is amazing. And I missed those moments a lot, so I had more of an affinity for that part probably of my trip.
Okay, that's perfect. You mentioned you were bike riding with a friend of yours. How did you make friends on this trip? Did you make friends, and how did you do that?
I always made friends. I'm luckily I'm a very chatty girl. So I was always, I would meet people. I stayed in hostels. I did Airbnbs, but I did a lot of hostels. I did like volunteer programs. So I was always meeting different people and just like talking to them. And when you're kind of, especially solo traveling, you meet other solo travelers who in that moment, maybe you want a friend. And then maybe later you don't want a friend. And we understand that. So it was really easy for me to make friends and just meet people. And now I have friends literally all over the world, which I love. And I think is so amazing. And there was never a point where I felt lonely or felt like, oh, I need this person. It was just kind of being really present in the moment with whoever happened to be there. And then maybe that moment was a moment, or maybe some person was somebody that we would keep in touch. But I just kind of decided to just be in it and just go with the flow wherever I was with whoever I happened to be with at that time.
I like to tell introverts or people who are nervous about, how am I going to meet people when I'm traveling? I'm just like, be there, and the extroverts will find you. There are people who will just walk up to you and start talking to you. Just talk
That's
back.
true.
Just
I'm one of those people. I was like, hey girl.
Meanwhile, I'm the introvert.
And I'll just come up next to you like, hey, I'm Amber.
Hi, Amber. Okay, so
yeah.
Stephanie, are we talking dating, or are we talking hostels next? I feel like we go either way.
Roshida has a strong anti-hostel bias, and she doesn't even stay in hostels. So do you, Amber, was this your first time staying in hostels during this sabbatical?
I've been staying in hostels since, years. I have always been a hostel girl. I'm trying to think. The first hostel I stayed in actually was in the United States, in Boston. I went on my first solo trip when I was 22, and I stayed in a hostel because I was poor in 22, and I was like, okay. And it didn't turn me off of hostel life. And I have stayed in probably more than 100 hostels at this point, I would think, because I've done it quite a bit throughout the States and pretty much any time that I travel. Now, when I had more money to spend, I would get a private room with my own bathroom. But I had no problem being a girl. I just like to get the bottom bunk if I could.
Yes,
I wanted to be the girl on the bottom bunk. But if I wasn't, it was fine. And I just would meet so many different people at the hostels. Like, I love to do it. Like, I really enjoy it. You meet so many amazing people from all over the world. Like, they're just stories I could just tell you. And these were people that I literally met in hostels, friends that I still have that I met in hostels, because it's just really fun and everyone's there for the same reason. So it was good for me. And you find automatic friends too.
Good. Yep. And Stephanie lied on my good name, so I'm not going to let that stand. I am not anti-hostel. I just haven't experienced a hostel yet. But I will say that I did not make half as many friends when traveling as people in hostels tell me they do. And so I recognize that as a benefit. And so I wanted to talk more about the benefits of hostels, because one day y'all will, the switch will flip, and I'm gonna do it.
You'll go hostel. I think the benefits of hostels are just, to me, so many, because it's not only do you meet people from all over the world. So wherever you happen to be, then there's people who are just filtering in from everywhere. And then you also learn about things. So part of my trip, I really didn't plan that much. I set off, I knew I was going to Colombia, and that I knew I needed to be in Medellin. That was what I knew. Everything else that came along the way, from people telling me, well, you should check out this place, or you should go here, you should do XYZ. And so I started kind of going along the way and going with the suggestions people would give me. And I found that really made me, that's when I got to the point where I just became really open to my experience in a way I don't think I would have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's awesome. So, Amber, let's talk about one of my favorite topics. Let's talk about dating.
Okay.
Did you date during the time that you were away?
I would say that I might have had some fun moments, but I can't necessarily say like I dated someone continuously per se,
Okay.
because like everything's just kind of in flux, and especially when you're doing hostel life, it doesn't always leave room for you to, depending on what type of dating you might try to be doing. That's the one downside of hostels, but people do work around it. But for me, I was kind of like, oh, well, I don't know about that. But I definitely did have like some moments out there for sure. Like I remember when I was in England, there was this guy who he heard me say something, and he happens to be Italian, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I just love the American accent." And I was like, "Really? This whole thing?" Like, no, I mean we're in England, like where they actually have a really cool accent. And he was like, "No, I really love your accent." And he was like, "I want to take you out for coffee." And I was just kind of like, "Okay." And so we ended up just right then and there going for coffee, impromptu, having great conversation. And when we were leaving, he walked me back to my train station, and he was just like, "I just want to give you a kiss." And I was like, okay. So I would have like these just fun moments, I would say, where you feel like you just have those sparks of connection. Or I don't know if you'll ever see this, but there was like this guy who worked at one of the hostels that I was last at in England, and like I was so sad that I had to leave because I really wanted to talk to him more because he was just such a cool person. So like there were like things along that way where you would meet people and there would just be like some energy that was there. That
You
was
didn't have a
nice.
schedule? You never wanted to just stay?
Oh, well, that was my last stop, so I actually
Okay.
did have to go, unfortunately. But I'm going back to England in
Okay,
March.
good.
The same
Okay,
hostel?
good.
Nah, I mean, it was a really nice hostel. That was really nice. So that's like the hostel perks. I've stayed at hostels with swimming pools. I've
Hmm.
stayed where they've had happy hour, where there has been free dinners. The best hostel I stayed at was in Tyrona Park, in Colombia, in a little town outside of Santa Marta. This hostel used to be a resort. Used to be a resort. They built a hostel there. So I'm talking about, it was nice. Like I even did a Facebook Live that day because I was like, everybody, you have to see this hostel. And like we're on beachfront property. There were hammocks, a pool. Like it was like we were at Club Med, but it was only $15 a night or less.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's hostel life.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, do you have any tips for women who are open to dating as they travel?
I say have fun. Like have fun, be open to different experiences, be open to different types of people because you're meeting so many different people as you go along. And I think that that's definitely part of the fun. I would say don't like feel like you have to be like, because this is a part of it, especially if you're in a hostel and things are going on around you. But just like being open and seeing like where magic moments could lead, or being open to a magic moment, I think it's really nice.
So that's helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have any advice for women who are afraid to take the leap, who are just afraid, who want to take a sabbatical, but
Hmm.
are afraid?
I think that if you're someone who's just really afraid, that you need to confront your fears head on. And when I say this, I mean you could do something like literally taking a sheet of paper and actually writing down what those fears are, and then going through and debunking them one by one, because the research is out there. Like a lot of times we kind of hold these ideas in our mind and we allow them to fester. But when you actually go and find research and find facts and find things, you start to see that the thing that you have a fear of, someone else has already confronted it, and they may have tips about it, or they have ideas for things that you can do. And so I think that that's really important to be able to say, okay, well, what is it like? Anytime I feel like a sense of anxiety about anything, I ask myself, what is it I'm really afraid of here? What am I feeling anxious about? Like actually really naming the feeling and the emotion, and then saying, what can I do about this? To me, I think that that's the most important thing that anyone can do with anything, but especially like when it comes to travel, because the information is out there. Like, look at us. We're three Black women who can tell other Black women about how to go and do this thing. And you're talking to people every day. That's amazing. Those resources are there. So I would say name the fear and then research the fear and then see how you can get over it.
That's actually really good advice. And Stephanie knows some of my fears. I'll be doing that tonight. I'll be sitting down with a pad of paper and working on that myself.
Yes.
Well, Sheeta, do you remember, Sheeta, when you left, what were the things that you were afraid? Like, did you have like the big three?
I was afraid I wouldn't be able to get a job back in my field when I came back, or I'd be out of touch with like the current state of things in my career.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not trying to come back.
You don't even want to come back
anymore. So like 6 months into it, I was like, what was that? Why was that? I'm retired, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I had any others. I was afraid that I wouldn't make it, but I don't really know what wouldn't make it looks like. I think that was really me projecting a fear of failure, of other people seeing my journey, like maybe ending early and seeing that as a failure. Yeah. I got over that by realizing that I don't really care what anybody else thinks, unless they're paying all my bills. And if so, sign up, fly. Tell me whatever you want. I might not listen to it. Tell me whatever you want. I am accepting bill payers, so if you're out there,
you need to come up with a better name. You don't say I'm accepting bill payers. You need to like sponsors maybe or something. Even sugar daddy. Sugar daddy is a better term than bill payers.
They ain't getting no sugar at this point. It's just bill payers. So keeping it real.
Contributors.
I will accept contributors. Yeah. I think those are really the two that I can remember right now. I had a dog, so I had to finesse my way around that. But without me even asking, one of my girlfriends was like, "You want me to take your dog for you?" And I was like, "Jesus, you said her to me."
That's wonderful. Yes, that's wonderful.
Yeah, because I had no idea what I was gonna do. And she's adopted him now, and they're the best of friends, and she has another dog, and they're just a happy family.
Oh, that's so nice.
It is, because paying for dog sitting, girl.
Yeah.
Child. And I didn't have a house to sit.
That's it.
Yeah. So I couldn't even have someone come and like live there. But yeah, so I think those were my main fears. Stephanie, what were yours?
I was afraid that I wouldn't like it, because I never traveled for more than like 7 or 8 days at a time. So I was just afraid that I wouldn't like it. And there were days when I didn't like it. And there were days when it was the most amazing thing in the whole world. So and I was also afraid that I would run out of money. And I did. I came home with $32, $34. But those fears were I had built them up to be worse than they were. They came true, right? So my fears came true, and no big deal. I handled them like a pro.
Okay, but while we're here, let's talk about not liking it, because there are days I didn't like it. There are days Stephanie didn't like it. Amber, let's talk about the days you didn't like it, because I know they were there.
Yes, there were definitely some days. The days that I didn't like it, like when you said that, I immediately was like, So I think one of the things that was tough for me, it was kind of something that was in my control, but I never really quite figured out, was that, so I traveled with a backpack, and that was it. It was just me and my backpack, which I named Donatella, because she was green. She was a lovely jade green and kind of turtle shaped when full. And so I decided that she should be Donatella, like one of the Ninja Turtles, but a lady, of course. And so Donatella got really heavy. I'm going to keep it all the way real. Like Donatella, at one point, I think her heaviest was like 30 pounds. And I'm not in the most amazing shape enough where I'm going to haul 30 pounds consistently. So there would be times, I think on those days when I had to move around, which could be kind of frequent, those were the moments when I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, I almost ditched the backpack in Spain. Because I was like, I can't do this anymore. There was one time when I had to literally climb up a mountain with the backpack on, because the place where I stayed, amazing space in Granada, Spain. was on top of this mountain, and that was the only way to get up to it. And I had the backpack on, and I literally sat down and cried. I sat and like tears were rolling down my face. It was like the dramatic cry. And then I was like, okay, I've got to get this together. And then after that, I started just throwing stuff out of the backpack because I was like, I am not going through this again. So a lot of my moments of not liking it were kind of with that. I think I got kind of burnt out on people at different points where, especially, that's one of the things about staying in the hostel where you're seeing so many people and like everyone's asking you, what's your name? Where are you from? How long have you been traveling? And you just kind of get tired of like these like surface level conversations. So I think at that moment it was really important for me to like make sure I was maintaining, connecting with my friends, my friends and some of my friends in the States, and making sure I was doing that to kind of offset all the time I was spending feeling like a stranger to a certain degree. So I think those were like definitely some of the moments where I kind of was just like, okay, I'm over this. They definitely happened around that backpack and me being tired of lugging that thing, but also sometimes around just feeling like I don't feel like talking to anybody right now, and you may want a deeper connection with like the people that and that's not really going to happen at the first meeting with somebody that you're meeting on the road. Yeah.
How did you stay connected with your people at home?
I was always WhatsApping, and it would be funny because people would call me at random times. Like I remember my nephew, who's 2, wanted to FaceTime with me. It was 3:00 in the morning in Spain. And I was like, did you call me? And my brother was like, yeah, that was little Zachary. I was like, well, tell little Zachary that Auntie Amber is asleep. It's 3:00 in the morning. But I would like WhatsApp with people. I would definitely use Instagram as a way. So, when your friends are doing their Instagram stories, I would make sure that I was commenting on their stories and just really staying connected with their life in that capacity, because I didn't want to come back and be like, oh yeah, so what's going on? Like I was able to still feel pretty connected as much as I possibly could. Yeah.
That's good. Changing topics a little bit. What are your current plans for the Fab Life Project?
Those are great questions. So you guys have a lot of good questions, actually.
We're a good team.
Bomb. So for the Fab Life Project, over time it has evolved. It's evolved from me having a blog to me wanting to make this into a site, into a destination, into a place where women can go and get inspiration around how they can think about changing their story. So my background has always been in journalism, has always been in storytelling, and I want to create a way to have people apply this idea of a personal brand to like their life, like a personal brand. I mean, on a deep level, like what are the stories that you tell yourself about who you are? What are the stories that block you from doing the things that will make you into who you really want to be? So really getting on that deeper level. And phase 1 of that is a podcast where I want to be interviewing people and having them come on and talk about the different ways that they've changed their story or confronted different things that they've had to do. I'm calling it like a pod class with the idea, yeah.
Ew.
Thank you. Ew. The idea being that, you have the people who are coming and they're talking about their life and teaching people through telling their story, but also picking out topics and just kind of doing a deep dive into them as we go along. And then my next step with that is that I want to begin coaching people and doing strategy sessions to help people think about the ways in which they're stuck in their story, how they can move forward. And I want to do a thing called pop-up workshop, where literally like twice a month, I kind of open myself up to a set number of sessions and have people in them and do workshops with them. So I have like some different plans going on, but those are the 2 that I'm working on implementing this year.
So those are 2020 plans. We'll see
Those
them.
are my
We'll
20.
update us.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
I think one of the things I would like to mention is that, people think when you travel, you need a ton of money to be able to travel. And the thing is, you realize once you start going that you really don't, and that the only kind of variable there is you. So it depends on how you like to travel, what you're willing to try. Like Stephanie, you house sit. That's something some people may not be comfortable with, or some people might think, oh my God, that's amazing. And it blows their mind. So there's like so many different ways to make this happen, because I knew when I was saving up my money that, okay, I have to get to a point where I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to wait until I have this amount, because then you can push that number back. It just keeps going, and then you just never go. So I was like, you know what, whatever trip I'm meant to have will be the trip that I have. And then I would think about that along the way, and just kind of need to, like, I adjusted, and I went with that. And that for me was like the best thing, because it's like, okay, there's some things out of my control, but when it comes to the money, which I think people kind of look at that as a factor that can hold them back, there's just so many different things you can do. So I don't know if you've had anybody tell you about Workaway, but I did 3 workaways when I was traveling. So there were 3 different points in time where I stayed places for free. And the work that I did was what was in my field. I was like, I only want to use the skills that I have. So I looked for places that needed somebody to help them with their marketing. And that's what I went and did.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
you really worked like your regular job in your regular field.
Yes, but in amazing places. I went to
Yeah.
Portugal, and I was at this lady's, she was turning her family house into a retreat center. And so I was working, but I was also going and taking breaks and eating organic tomatoes out of the garden. I was going back and playing with the goats. Like, there was this whole experience that was happening around me. And with Workaway, you're only supposed to do work for 4 hours of a day. So it's like part-time volunteering basically, but you get your accommodations covered, and a lot of times your food covered as well, and you
That's
still
amazing.
have the freedom to experience the city. And that's something that I could put on my resume too.
Okay. Well, let's dig a little deeper into the money. Okay, so
hmm
you saved for a year, right?
I saved for a little less than a year.
And
I
you
would
were,
say for
and how long
hmm
were you gone? Was that 8 or 9 months? 7, 8,
about 9 months.
9 months. How
Yeah.
much money had you saved for the 9 months?
So in total, in cash, I saved like 10,000, and then I had another 5,000 of my savings that I was willing to use. But
Okay.
I saved specifically with the idea of travel in mind.
So in less than a year, you saved 10 months. You saved $10,000 for 9 months of travel.
hmm
What did you do? I know you got a new job, but was paying you more than before. Were there other things that you did to build up your savings?
I just literally worked and stopped living the way that I was living. So for me, it was, I said, okay, I'm only going to live off of one of my paychecks. My rent was kind of cheap, because in New York, it's hard to find cheap rent, but my apartment was just like old, right? So that was a sacrifice. I was like, that was a sacrifice, which is why I was trying to move before, but I ended up saying, okay, I'm going to stay another year in this apartment that I'm tired of being in, but it allows for me to put away as much money as I can. If I went out to like drink with friends, which, New Yorkers, we love to drink, we're always at the bar, I would just get like, do a happy hour, or I would just get like one drink, and then I just had fun talking to people. So for me, it was living very consciously. And because I knew I was working toward a goal, I was no longer doing like the emotional shopping that people do where they're trying to numb themselves from how much they don't like what their life looks like anyway. Suddenly my life was looking good. So I didn't need to be at the TJ Maxx, out at like Target, just buying random things. I was able to just really focus on putting away as much money as I possibly could.
And I think this is a really important message, because so many women talk to us and they say like, how could I ever do this? How can I save the money? Where does the money come from? They think, anyone who does this is sitting on a pile of cash, but
No,
you made a decision, and a year later you were gone for 9 months. And that's, I think, a lot of people would love to do that, but they
yeah.
don't think it's possible. So
They
that's
don't think it's possible. I've had people who've asked me this before. I remember one guy, he was like, so how did you get the money for this? And I told him exactly what I just told you guys. And then he stopped and he said, so basically you did something that anyone could do. And I said, yeah, you're 100% right. I did do something that anyone could do, because I didn't, like, one of my friends was like, are you using your savings for this? I was like, no, my plan is that I'm not touching my savings at all, with the exception of the little money that I was like, okay, I'm willing to put this toward it if I need to. but that's ultimately my goal, is to save this amount by continuing to work and stack those checks. And like, I even had a post-it note on my wall that had like each day that paycheck would happen, and I would strike them out, strike them out, strike them out, so that each time I was seeing, okay. And it was like a keep going too, because I was really tired of that job that I was at. My boss was like, oh my God, that lady not good. I was like, okay, I need to be out of this situation. So there was just like a lot of good motivation happening for me, but having the visual for it was also really helpful too.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing in my soul, like, you can talk crazy to me if you want to, because guess what? I'm not going to be here in a month. I don't care. Had a little attitude with it.
Yep. I have already typed up my resignation.
Sure did.
All for a purpose, and I'll be at the finish line soon.
Yep.
That's really special. And I, like I said, I think that this message of sacrificing just a little bit to get what
Mm-hmm.
you want is so important. And you're right. Like, when I knew I was going, it's also when I stumbled on a pot of cash. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I did plan my trip in a way that I wouldn't dip into my savings. And so that, to your point
Yeah,
earlier, like, you can plan the trip that is right for you. So,
exactly.
I think that some people, you talk about $15,000 for 9 months. I'm not one of them, but I know there are people out there who are spending $15,000 on 2 vacations in a year,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
3. Um, and so to know that you lived outside of the US for 9 months on that, and you weren't going hungry, and
No, I
you know,
definitely wasn't going hungry.
you weren't on, you weren't like sleeping in the streets, you weren't
No.
uncomfortable, you had the life you wanted
Mm-hmm.
for 9 months. Um,
Yes, I sure did. I was never, it was never a point where I was uncomfortable. It was never a point where I was like, oh, you can make different choices. It might be like I could go horseback riding, or maybe I spend that money to go on this side trip. So you just make the choices that you need to make. And for me, that made it all the more sweeter to get creative about how I was going to do the things that I wanted to accomplish, and being able to look back at on that time and say, I told my best friend, I said, I lived for under $20,000 this year. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, because, you're not like dealing with a lot of things that the US is putting on you. You really do have the freedom to design how you want to live your life.
yeah. And
Yeah.
a lot of us get into cycle, and I've said this before, about working really hard to afford to live in the US, working in the
Yeah.
US to afford to live in the US. And it's just a cycle that is like, if we weren't living in the US with our high cost of living and the medical expenses and
Mm-hmm.
everything else, you could live a gentler life in a lot of other
Yes,
countries.
you can live a
Absolutely.
gentler life. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, because that's one of the things I thought about when I was telling my friend earlier that I found the US to be boring, is that when you go to these other countries and you see how they function in different ways and how the people are living their life, it starts to really change your mindset. And you see how I think the US kind of traps you in a lot of ways. Like, we would have this conversation a lot of times at the hostels, because of the United States of traps. Because when you think about it, from the minute you're getting out of like free primary school, right? Everyone's pushing you towards college, and the 18-year-old making this decision with literally thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on the
Yep.
line makes absolutely no sense. Like, there's nothing we could say that could even remotely justify that, other than we know once you get into that cycle of that debt, because I know student loan debt is holding a lot of people down and back, it becomes really impossible how to a hard place to try to break free, because you have this loan that never goes away, that you have to pay, and you're stuck. Even if you don't like the job, you're stuck there because you need to know how you have to pay off this debt. And I think people slowly start to numb themselves over
Yeah.
time to this reality, and they aren't able to see how they can break out, because it's just kind of the situation that they're in, or there are other people that they know are in. And then they start buying things to make themselves feel better, and it just goes deeper, 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 deeper. And for me, I always try to have a mindset about not being that person, which is how I started the Fab Life Project, with this idea of wanting to talk about these things, because I think that we should talk about them more, as a country, but just as young people who want to see changes in the world happen and change the way that people are thinking about these things and demand for things to be better, because healthcare shouldn't bankrupt anybody. You know, that shouldn't be the case, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I also budgeted for my insurance. I want to throw that out there as well. That was part of my budgeting, was that I knew I was going to have an independent insurance plan on top of my travel insurance, and that I needed to be able to think about that as part of the money that I was spending as well.
So you purchased an international medical insurance plan?
I had travel insurance, but
Yeah.
then I also had just regular American insurance as well, in case something happened and I needed it. Yeah.
While you're home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Darn America. Those were plane trips, like every month having to
Every
pay
month.
that. I was like,
Every
I could
month.
be going somewhere with this money.
I was like, when I had started paying for Cobra, I was like, what are these numbers? What can I talk about? I was like, I don't understand what's happening. But you know, I always say that having travel insurance and having medical insurance is better than your options if you don't have them. So
no, this is very true. Very, very true.
If you've watched this far, you are interested in taking a career break to travel and living your own Fab Life project. Roshida and I have created resources for you to help get you from dreaming to planning. I have a list of 50 cities where you can Airbnb for $500 per month. Go to the link in the description and you'll see the blog post. You can even download the list for free to keep it handy.
All right, and I have the complete gap year planning checklist. So you're listening to Amber's story, you're thinking, I would love to do this, but I don't know where to start. I've got you. Down in the description, I have a little checklist for you of some things to think about before you start the real planning process. It's not going to get you all the way to the finish line, but it's going to give you some things to think about early on. So Amber, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people who want to follow you on your journey reach you?
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. To reach me, you can find me always on Instagram at the Fab Life Project. I have another one that I post a lot of my travel photos to, which is at Amber J. Adams, which is my name. And that can be found all over the internet as Amber J. Adams. But to really see how I talk about approaching creating and designing your own life on your own terms, I would say the Fab Life Project. Just actually follow both. How about that?
And your website is?
thefablifeproject.com.